Picture this. You're in the middle of what should be a simple conversation when suddenly the person across from you shuts down completely. Their face hardens, their arms cross. And you realize that somehow, without meaning to, you've just created an enemy out of someone who was supposed to be on your side. This happens every single day to millions of people, in boardrooms, in bedrooms, family dinners that turn into battlefields. I think we're communicating, but we're actually doing something far more dangerous. We're building walls instead of bridges. Here's what they don't teach you in school. Every word you speak is either an act of violence or an act of love. There's no neutral ground. Every conversation either brings people closer together or pushes them further apart. And most of us, through no fault of our own, have been trained to be communication assassins. What if I told you there's a way to speak that makes people feel safer, not threatened? A language that creates connection instead of conflict. A communication system so powerful that it can transform your relationships, your career, and your entire life in ways you never thought possible. Today we're diving deep into Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. And I need you to understand something crucial. This isn't just another communication book. This is the manual for human connection that should have come with your birth certificate. Marshall Rosenberg spent over 40 years developing this system, working in war zones, mediating between gangs, transforming relationships that seemed impossible to repair. He discovered something revolutionary. The language we use doesn't just describe our reality, it creates it. Right now, you're probably communicating in a way that creates resistance, defensiveness, and disconnection without even knowing it. But by the end of this journey, you'll have rewired your entire communication operating system. You'll speak in a way that makes people want to understand you instead of fight you. You'll listen in a way that makes others feel truly heard for the first time in their lives. In the next 90 minutes, we are not just going to read a book. We are going to deconstruct the very programming that's been running your relationships and install a new one. We're going to transform you from someone who accidentally hurts people with words into someone who heals them. Let's begin the upgrade. Here's the transformation journey we're about to take together. Chapter 1 will reveal the heart of nonviolent communication and why most of us are accidentally speaking a language of violence. Chapter 2 exposes the 4 deadly communication patterns that destroy relationships without you realizing it. Chapter 3 teaches you to see without judging, the skill that changes everything. Chapter 4 unlocks your emotional vocabulary and shows you how to express what you really feel. Chapter 5 reveals the shocking truth about who's actually responsible for your emotions. Chapter 6 shows you how to ask for what you need in a way that people want to give it to you. Chapter 7 transforms you into an empathic listener who can diffuse any conflict. Chapter 8 reveals the true power of empathy and how it can change lives. Chapter 9 teaches you the most important conversation you'll ever have, the one with yourself. Chapter 10 shows you how to express anger in a way that brings people closer instead of pushing them away. Chapter 11 explores when and how to use protective force without creating enemies. Chapter 12 reveals how to free yourself and help others escape destructive communication patterns. Finally, Chapter 13 shows you how to express appreciation in a way that truly nourishes the human spirit. Let's go on a journey of transformation, one chapter at a time. Chapter 1. Giving from the heart of nonviolent communication. What if everything you think you know about good communication is wrong? We've been taught that communication is about getting our point across, winning arguments, or at least avoiding conflict. But Marshall Rosenberg discovered something that changes everything. True communication isn't about talking at all. It's about connecting heart to heart, human to human. Think of communication like water flowing between 2 vessels. Most of us have learned to communicate like we're trying to force water through a clogged pipe. We push harder, we raise our voices, we repeat ourselves more forcefully. But the blockage isn't in the other person, it's in the language itself. Nonviolent communication is like clearing that pipe completely. Suddenly understanding flows effortlessly between you and others. But here's the thing. This isn't about being nice or avoiding difficult conversations. It's about being more powerful, more effective, and more authentic than you've ever been before. Marshall tells a story about working with a group of students in a school where racial tensions were running high. Instead of lecturing them about tolerance, he simply asked, "What are you feeling right now? What do you need?" Within minutes, Students who had been enemies were seeing each other as human beings with the same basic needs to be understood, to belong, to feel safe. Here's your first transformation. Stop trying to be right. Start trying to connect. The next time someone says something that triggers you, instead of preparing your counterargument, ask yourself, what is this person really trying to tell me about what they need? This shift alone will change how people respond to you, because suddenly you're not an adversary trying to prove them wrong. You're an ally trying to understand their world. But here's where it gets really interesting. When you speak from the heart instead of the head, something magical happens to the other person. Chapter 2. Communication that blocks compassion. Here's a truth that might shock you. You're probably committing acts of psychological violence every single day without knowing it. Marshall identified for specific ways we communicate that create pain, defensiveness, and disconnection. He calls them the 4 horsemen of communication apocalypse, and they're so embedded in our culture that we think they're normal. The first horseman is moral judgment. Every time you say someone is wrong, stupid, selfish, or inappropriate, you're not describing reality. You're creating an enemy. Your brain thinks it's analyzing the situation, but what you're actually doing is trying to make someone else wrong so you can feel right. Listen to how differently these hit. You're being selfish versus I'm feeling hurt because I need more consideration for my time. One creates a war. The other creates an opportunity for connection. The second horseman is comparison. The moment you say someone else is better, worse, more successful, or less capable than someone else, you've just turned life into a competition instead of a collaboration. You've made someone feel inadequate or superior, and either way, you've destroyed the possibility of genuine connection. The third horseman is denial of responsibility. Every time you say you make me feel, or I have to, or they made me do it, you're giving away your power and blaming others for your experience. This doesn't just damage relationships, it makes you a victim of your own life. But the fourth horseman might be the deadliest. Demands disguised as requests. When you say, could you please? But what you really mean is you better, the other person feels it. They feel controlled, manipulated, and resentful. And they'll either comply with hidden resentment or rebel with open resistance. Think about your last 5 conversations. How many of these horsemen showed up? Most people realize they've been accidentally creating the very problems they're trying to solve. Here's your reality check. Choose one person in your life who you feel disconnected from. Notice how many of these 4 patterns show up when you think about them or talk to them. This awareness alone will begin to shift everything. The beautiful thing about recognizing these patterns is that you now have a choice. You can continue using the language of violence, or you can learn the language of life. Chapter 3. Observing without evaluating. What if I told you that most of what you think you're seeing isn't actually happening? Your brain is constantly mixing facts with interpretations, and this confusion is destroying your relationships. When you say you always interrupt me, you think you're stating a fact, but you're actually combining an observation you spoke while I was speaking with an evaluation. This is a pattern that defines who you are. The person hearing this doesn't hear feedback. They hear an attack on their character. Suddenly you're in a fight about whether they always do something instead of having a conversation about what just happened. Marshall teaches us to separate observations from evaluations like a scientist separates variables. This isn't about being emotionless or robotic. This is about being so precise in your communication that people can actually hear you. Here's the difference. You didn't call me back versus you never think about my feelings. One is an observation that opens dialogue. The other is an evaluation that starts a war. Think of your mind like a courtroom. Most of us are terrible witnesses because we keep mixing what we saw with what we think it means. But when you learn to be a perfect witness, something extraordinary happens. The other person can actually see what you're seeing instead of having to defend themselves against your interpretation. Here's a powerful example. A woman told Marshall she was frustrated because her teenage son was lazy. When Marshall asked her to describe what she actually observed, she said, "Well, he leaves his dishes in the sink." That's radically different from lazy, isn't it? When she went home and said, "I notice your dishes are in the sink, and I'm feeling overwhelmed because I need more support with household tasks," her son responded completely differently. Instead of defending himself against being called lazy, he could hear his mother's actual experience. This is your communication superpower, becoming a precise observer instead of a judge and jury. When you describe exactly what you see, hear, and experience without adding your story about what it means, people can finally understand your world instead of defending themselves against your interpretations. Try this transformation practice. For the next 24 hours, catch yourself every time you're about to say what someone is or isn't. Instead, describe exactly what they did or didn't do. Watch how differently people respond when you give them facts instead of verdicts. But here's where this gets really powerful. When you stop evaluating others, you start accessing your own authentic feelings.
Chapter 4. Identifying and expressing feelings. Most people think they're expressing feelings when they're actually expressing thoughts disguised as emotions. When you say, "I feel like you don't care about me," you're not sharing a feeling. You're sharing an interpretation. When you say, "I feel manipulated," you're not describing your emotional experience. You're making an accusation.
Real feelings are simple. Happy, sad, angry, afraid, ashamed, excited, grateful, lonely, peaceful. They're the raw data of your human experience. But we've been taught to intellectualize our emotions instead of feeling them, and this creates enormous confusion in our relationships. Marshall discovered that when people learn to identify and express their actual feelings, everything changes. Suddenly, instead of attacking or defending, you're simply sharing your authentic human experience. An authentic human experience is impossible to argue with. Here's what most people don't realize. Your feelings are information, not weapons. When you say, "I'm feeling hurt," you're not trying to make someone wrong. You're sharing valuable data about your inner world. But when you say, "I feel like you're being cruel," you've just launched an attack disguised as vulnerability. Think of feelings like the dashboard lights in your car. They're not good or bad. They're just information about what's happening under the hood. Anger tells you that something important to you is being threatened. Sadness tells you that you've lost something you valued. Fear tells you that you need safety. Joy tells you that your deeper needs are being met. But here's the transformation. When you express authentic feelings instead of disguised thoughts, people want to understand you instead of defend themselves against you. There's something about genuine human emotion that creates instant connection. Marshall worked with a man who was furious with his wife for always being late. But when they dug deeper, the man realized he wasn't actually angry. He was feeling scared and sad. Scared that he wasn't important to her. Sad that he felt disconnected from her. When he shared these real feelings instead of his anger about lateness, his wife finally understood what was really happening. She wasn't hearing criticism about time management. She was hearing her husband's deep longing for connection. Your feeling vocabulary is your connection vocabulary. The more precisely you can identify and express what you're actually experiencing, the more deeply people can understand and connect with you. Here's your emotional intelligence upgrade. Keep a feelings list handy and start noticing the difference between what you feel and what you think. When you catch yourself saying, "I feel like," stop and ask, "What am I actually feeling in my body right now?" This simple shift will revolutionize your relationships. But feelings without needs are just emotional weather. The real transformation happens when you understand what your feelings are trying to tell you. Chapter 5. Taking responsibility for our feelings. This might be the most liberating truth you'll ever hear. No one can make you feel anything. Your feelings aren't caused by other people's actions. They're caused by your own needs being met or unmet. This isn't philosophy. This is practical psychology that will change your life. When someone cancels plans and you feel disappointed, the cancellation isn't causing your disappointment. Your disappointment is caused by your need for connection or predictability not being met. When someone criticizes you and you feel angry, their criticism isn't causing your anger. Your anger is caused by your need for respect or understanding not being met. This distinction changes everything because it means you're not a victim of other people's behavior. You're a powerful human being who can understand your own needs and take action to meet them. Most people think this sounds like blaming yourself for your feelings, but it's actually the opposite. It's taking your power back. When you understand that your feelings are information about your needs, you can do something about them instead of just hoping other people will change. Marshall tells the story of a woman who was furious with her husband for working late every night. She kept saying, "He makes me so angry." But when she learned to take responsibility for her feelings, she realized her anger was actually information about her needs for companionship and partnership not being met. Instead of attacking her husband for working late, she said, "When you work late several nights in a row, I feel lonely because I need more connection with you." Would you be willing to set aside one evening this week for us to spend time together? This completely changed the dynamic. Instead of her husband feeling attacked and defensive, he could hear her longing for connection. Instead of a fight about work schedules, they had a conversation about how to meet both of their needs. Here's your responsibility revolution. Start every feeling statement with "I feel" and end it with "because I need." This simple formula transforms you from a victim into a powerful communicator who takes ownership of their inner world. But taking responsibility for your feelings is just the first step. The real magic happens when you learn to express your needs clearly. Think about the last time you were upset with someone. What need of yours wasn't being met? Security, respect, understanding, fun? When you can identify the need behind the feeling, you suddenly have options for getting that need met, instead of just hoping the other person will change. This is emotional adulthood, understanding that your feelings are your responsibility and your pathway to getting your needs met. Chapter 6. Requesting that, which would enrich life. Here's where most people destroy their relationships without knowing it. They make demands disguised as requests. A demand says, "Do this or else." A request says, "Would you be willing to do this to help meet my need?" The difference isn't just in the words. It's in your energy, your intention, in what you do when someone says no. When you make a demand, you're trying to control another person's behavior. When you make a request, you're inviting them to participate in meeting both of your needs. One creates resistance. The other creates collaboration. Marshall discovered that most people have never learned to make actual requests. They've learned to complain, hint, manipulate, or demand, but they've never learned to clearly and directly ask for what they need in a way that honors the other person's freedom to choose. Here's the difference. You need to start helping around the house versus, "Would you be willing to take responsibility for doing the dishes 3 times this week? I'm feeling overwhelmed with household tasks and would really appreciate the support." The first one is a demand disguised as a request. It doesn't specify what you want, when you want it, or why it matters to you. The second one is a clear, specific, doable request that connects to your needs and gives the other person the information they need to make an informed choice. But here's the real test. What happens when someone says no to your request? If you get angry, frustrated, or start trying to convince them, you weren't making a request, and we're making a demand. A true request comes with complete acceptance that the other person might say no, and you're okay with that because you have other strategies for meeting your needs. This doesn't mean you don't care about the outcome. It means you care more about the relationship than about controlling the other person. Marshall worked with a couple where the woman kept asking her husband to be more romantic. But when Marshall helped her make a specific request, she said, "Would you be willing to bring me flowers once a week and plan a date night twice a month?" This gave her husband something concrete he could do instead of trying to guess what more romantic meant. Your request formula: specific action plus time frame plus willingness to hear no equals connection instead of control. Here's your transformation challenge. Think of something you've been wanting from someone in your life. Instead of complaining about what they're not doing, make a specific, doable request that connects to your needs. And be genuinely willing to hear no, because that willingness is what makes it safe for them to say yes. But making powerful requests is only half the equation. The other half is learning to receive what others are trying to tell you. Chapter 7. Receiving empathically. What if I told you that the most powerful thing you can do in any relationship isn't to talk, but to listen in a way that makes the other person feel completely understood? Most of us think we're good listeners, but we're actually just waiting for our turn to talk. We're listening for what's wrong with what the other person is saying so we can correct them, fix them, or convince them. But empathic listening is something completely different. Empathic listening means listening for the feelings and needs behind the words. It means hearing the human being instead of just the content. It means reflecting back what someone is experiencing, so they feel truly seen and understood. When someone says you never help around the house, most people hear an attack and respond defensively. Yet an empathic listener hears, "I'm feeling overwhelmed and I need more support." They might respond with, "It sounds like you're feeling frustrated because you need more partnership with household tasks. Is that right?" This simple shift changes everything. Instead of an argument about who does more work, you now have a conversation about how to meet both people's needs for support and appreciation. Marshall discovered that when people feel truly heard, they naturally become more open, more flexible, more willing to find solutions that work for everyone. But when people feel misunderstood, they become defensive, rigid, and focused on being right instead of finding resolution. Here's the empathy formula. It sounds like you're feeling emotion because you need. Is that right? A simple reflection lets people know you're trying to understand their world instead of defend your own. But here's what most people get wrong about empathy. They think it means agreeing with the other person or giving up their own needs. Empathy doesn't mean you have to do what someone wants. It just means you understand what they're experiencing before you respond. Marshall worked with parents and teenagers, and he noticed that when parents learned to listen empathically first, teenagers became much more willing to listen to their parents' concerns. When you make someone feel understood, they naturally want to understand you in return. Think about someone in your life who you feel really listens to you. How does it feel to talk to them? That's the gift you can give to everyone in your life by learning to listen empathically. Your listening transformation. The next time someone shares something difficult with you, resist the urge to give advice. Share your own story or fix their problem. Watch how they respond when they feel truly understood. But empathy isn't just about listening to others. It's about connecting with the universal human needs that we all share. Chapter 8. The power of empathy. Empathy is the most powerful force for human connection that exists, and most of us have never learned to use it. When you truly understand what someone else is experiencing, something magical happens. The walls between you disappear. You stop seeing them as other and start seeing them as another you, having a different experience but sharing the same basic human needs. Marshall discovered that empathy has the power to transform the most hostile, defensive person into someone who's open and collaborative. But this isn't about being nice or avoiding conflict. This is about accessing a superpower that can change any relationship. Here's what most people don't understand. Empathy isn't about fixing, advising, or even helping. It's about presence. It's about being so completely present with another person's experience that they feel less alone in their pain or struggle. Marshall tells a story about working with a woman whose teenage daughter was using drugs. Instead of lecturing, threatening, or punishing, the mother learned to listen empathically. She said, "It sounds like you're in a lot of pain and you're looking for some way to feel better. Is that right?" The daughter, who had been defensive and hostile, suddenly broke down and said, "Yes, I feel so alone and scared all the time." That moment of empathic connection opened the door to real conversation about what the daughter needed and how the family could support her. This is the power of empathy. It transforms enemies into allies, problems into solutions, and isolation into connection. But here's the thing about empathy. You can't fake it. People can sense whether you're genuinely trying to understand them or just going through the motions. Empathy requires you to be vulnerable enough to feel what someone else is feeling without trying to fix it or make it go away. When you offer genuine empathy, you're giving someone the greatest gift possible. The experience of being completely understood and accepted as they are, not as you think they should be. Your empathy practice. Choose someone in your life who you've been in conflict with. Instead of trying to solve the problem or prove your point, spend time genuinely trying to understand what they're feeling and needing. Ask questions like, "Help me understand what this is like for you," or "What's most important to you about this situation?" This empathic presence is so rare in our world that when you offer it, people will remember forever. But the most important person to offer empathy to is yourself. Chapter 9. Connecting compassionately with ourselves. The most important conversation you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. And most of us are incredibly cruel to ourselves without realizing it. We judge ourselves, criticize ourselves, and demand perfection from ourselves in ways we would never treat a friend. We say things to ourselves like, "I'm so stupid," or "I never do anything right," or "I should have known better." And then we wonder why we feel bad about ourselves. Marshall discovered that self-compassion isn't just about feeling better, it's about accessing your own wisdom and power. When you treat yourself with the same kindness you would show a good friend, you become more creative, more resilient, and more capable of learning from your mistakes. Think about how you talk to yourself when you make a mistake. You say, "That was stupid, you idiot," or do you say, "That's interesting, I wonder what I can learn from this"? The way you talk to yourself determines not just how you feel, but how quickly you can learn and grow. Self-compassion has 3 parts. offering yourself empathy for your feelings, understanding the needs behind your actions, and making requests of yourself instead of demands. When you mess up, instead of attacking yourself, you can say, "I'm feeling disappointed because I need to be reliable, and I'm committed to learning from this experience so I can do better next time." This isn't about lowering your standards or making excuses. It's about treating yourself like a human being who's learning and growing instead of a machine that should perform perfectly. Marshall worked with people who were recovering from addiction, and he noticed that the ones who learned self-compassion were much more successful than those who relied on self-criticism and shame. When you treat yourself with kindness, you create the safety you need to be honest about your struggles and committed to your growth. Your self-compassion transformation. Pay attention to your inner voice for one day. Every time you catch yourself being critical, pause and ask, "What am I feeling right now? What do I need? How can I treat myself with the same kindness I would show a good friend?" This practice alone will change your relationship with yourself and, consequently, all your other relationships. Because when you stop being your own worst enemy, you stop making other people into enemies too. But what about when you're really angry? Can nonviolent communication handle the most difficult emotions? Chapter 10. Expressing anger fully. Here's something that might surprise you. Anger isn't the problem. What you do with anger is the problem. Most of us have learned either to suppress our anger, which makes us resentful and passive-aggressive, or to express it in ways that hurt people, which destroys relationships. But Marshall discovered a third option, expressing anger fully while maintaining connection. Anger is information. It's your internal alarm system telling you that something important to you is being threatened. The question isn't whether to feel angry. The question is how to use that anger as fuel for positive change instead of destruction. When you feel angry, there are always two things happening. Something happened that you didn't like, and you have a need that's not being met. Most people focus on the first part and ignore the second. They attack the person or situation they're angry about instead of addressing the underlying need. But here's the transformation. When you can identify the need behind your anger and express that need clearly, your anger becomes a bridge to deeper connection instead of a weapon that destroys it. Marshall tells the story of a man who was furious with his wife for spending money without discussing it with him. Instead of attacking her about the spending, he learned to say, "When I see charges on our credit card that we haven't talked about, I feel scared because I need security and partnership in our financial decisions. Can we talk about how to handle money decisions together?" This completely changed their dynamic. Instead of her feeling attacked and defensive, she could understand his need for security and partnership. Instead of a fight about money, they had a conversation about how to make financial decisions as a team. Your anger formula. When specific observation, "I feel angry because I need underlying need." Would you be willing to specific request? This isn't about suppressing your anger or pretending to be calm when you're not. This is about using the energy of your anger to fuel clear, powerful communication that gets your needs met instead of pushing people away. Here's your anger transformation. Think about something you're angry about right now. What need of yours isn't being met? Security, respect, fairness, connection? How could you express that need in a way that invites collaboration instead of creating defensiveness? When you learn to express anger as information about your needs instead of attacks on other people, you become incredibly powerful in your relationships. But sometimes, you need to set boundaries to protect those needs. Chapter 11. The protective use of force. Sometimes compassion requires saying no. Sometimes love means setting boundaries. Sometimes the most caring thing you can do is protect yourself or others from harmful behavior. Nonviolent communication doesn't mean being passive or permissive. It means being clear about your boundaries while maintaining respect for everyone's humanity. There's a difference between punitive force and protective force. Punitive force is designed to make someone suffer for what they've done wrong. Protective force is designed to stop harmful behavior and protect everyone's well-being. When you use punitive force, you're trying to teach someone a lesson through pain. When you use protective force, you're simply preventing harm while maintaining the person's dignity. Marshall worked in schools where they transformed discipline from punishment to protection. Instead of suspending students for fighting, they would separate the students and help each one understand what they were feeling and needing. They would then work together to find ways to meet everyone's needs without violence. This approach was much more effective than punishment because it addressed the root causes of the behavior, instead of just trying to suppress it through fear. In your personal relationships, protective force might mean leaving a conversation that's become abusive, setting clear boundaries about what behavior you will and won't accept, or taking action to protect yourself or your children from harm. The key is to use force to protect, not to punish, to maintain the other person's dignity while protecting your own well-being. Your boundary-setting formula: I'm not willing to specific behavior because I need specific need. I'm willing to alternative behavior when you're ready. This isn't about winning or being right. It's about creating safety for everyone involved, while maintaining the possibility of future connection. Here's your protective force practice. Think about a situation where you need to set a boundary. How can you protect your needs while maintaining respect for the other person's humanity? What would protective force look like instead of punitive force? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no clearly and kindly. But the ultimate goal is always connection and mutual respect. Chapter 12. Liberating ourselves and counseling others. The deepest transformation happens when you stop trying to change other people and start modeling the change you want to see. Most of us get trapped in trying to fix, convince, or control the people in our lives. We think if we can just find the right words or the right approach, we can make them see things differently. But this approach actually creates more resistance and distance. Marshall discovered that when you focus on your own authentic expression and empathic listening, other people naturally begin to shift. When you stop trying to change them and start being genuinely curious about their experience, they feel safe enough to examine their own behavior. This doesn't mean you become passive or stop having opinions. It means you express your truth without attachment to how others respond. You offer empathy without trying to fix or rescue. You model the behavior you want to see instead of demanding it from others. The most powerful thing you can do for someone else's growth is to believe in their capacity to find their own solutions. While being completely present with their struggle, Marshall worked with couples who were on the brink of divorce. Instead of giving them advice or trying to solve their problems, he would help each person express their authentic feelings and needs while listening empathically to their partner. Almost without exception, when people felt truly heard and understood, they became more open to hearing their partner's perspective. Your relationship transformation. Choose one relationship that's been challenging. Instead of focusing on what the other person needs to change, focus on how you can show up more authentically and empathically. Express your own feelings and needs clearly. Listen to theirs without trying to fix or change them. Watch what happens when you stop trying to control the outcome and start trusting the process. This is liberation, freeing yourself from the exhausting job of trying to manage other people's behavior and freeing them from the pressure of meeting your expectations in order to earn your love. When you truly embody nonviolent communication, you become a safe harbor for others to explore their own growth and healing. But the most important appreciation you can offer is authentic recognition of the humanity in others. Chapter 13. Expressing appreciation in nonviolent communication. Most of us have never learned to give or receive appreciation in a way that truly nourishes the human spirit. We say thank you automatically. We give compliments that sound hollow, or we offer praise that actually creates pressure instead of connection. Real appreciation is much more specific and powerful than most people realize. Marshall discovered that appreciation has three components: the specific action you're appreciating, the feelings it generated in you, and the needs of yours that were met by that action. Instead of saying "you're so thoughtful," you might say, "when you remembered to pick up groceries on your way home. I felt so relieved because I really needed support with household tasks today." This kind of specific appreciation does something that generic praise can't do. It helps people understand the impact of their actions and connects them to the universal human needs they're helping to meet. But here's what most people get wrong about appreciation. They use it as a strategy to get more of what they want instead of as genuine recognition of another person's contribution to their well-being. Real appreciation comes from a place of fullness, not emptiness. You're not trying to get something from the other person. You're offering them the gift of knowing how their actions affected you. When someone does something you appreciate, instead of just saying thanks, try this formula. When you specific action, I felt emotion because it met my need for need. Thank you for contributing to my well-being in that way. This kind of appreciation is so rare that when you offer it, people light up. They feel seen, valued, and motivated to continue contributing to your mutual well-being. Your appreciation transformation? Think of 3 people who have done something recently that you appreciated. Instead of generic praise, offer them specific appreciation using the 3-component formula. Notice how differently they respond when they understand exactly how their actions affected you. But the most important appreciation is the one you give yourself for having the courage to learn and grow and connect more authentically with the people in your life. Think back to where we started this journey. You came here probably feeling frustrated with some of your relationships, maybe tired of misunderstandings and conflicts that seemed to come out of nowhere. You might have been wondering why communication felt so hard when it should be the most natural thing in the world. Now you understand something that most people never learn. Communication isn't about words. It's about connection. It's not about being right. It's about being real. It's not about winning. It's about understanding. You now have the tools to transform every relationship in your life. You can observe without judging. You can express your feelings instead of your interpretations. You can take responsibility for your emotions instead of blaming others. You can make requests instead of demands. You can listen empathically instead of defensively. You can express anger as information instead of attack. You can set boundaries with love instead of punishment. But here's the thing about tools. They only work if you use them. And using them requires courage, because it means being vulnerable, being honest, and being willing to change the patterns that have been running your relationships for years. The old way of communicating might have been familiar, but it wasn't serving you. It was creating distance when you wanted connection. It was creating conflicts when you wanted understanding. It was making enemies when you wanted allies. This new way of communicating will feel strange at first. You'll catch yourself falling back into old patterns. You'll forget to separate observations from evaluations. You'll make demands instead of requests. You'll listen to defend instead of understand. That's okay. It's part of learning. The question isn't whether you'll be perfect. The question is whether you'll be committed. Committed to speaking from your heart instead of your head. Committed to listening for the person behind the words. Committed to believing that every human being, including yourself, is worthy of understanding and connection. Every conversation is an opportunity to practice. Every conflict is a chance to build a bridge instead of a wall. Every difficult person is a teacher showing you where you still have room to grow. You have the power to change your relationships, not by changing other people, but by changing how you show up. When you speak the language of connection instead of the language of violence, something beautiful happens. People start responding to you differently. They feel safer with you. They trust you more. They open up to you in ways they never have before. This isn't just about communication. It's about creating the kind of world you want to live in, one conversation at a time. When you model nonviolent communication, you give others permission to be more authentic, more vulnerable, and more human with you. So here's my challenge to you. Take one relationship in your life that matters to you and commit to showing up differently. Stop trying to change them and start expressing yourself more authentically. Stop defending and start listening. Stop judging and start understanding. Watch what happens when you speak from your heart instead of your head. Watch what happens when you listen for the person instead of the problem. Watch what happens when you offer empathy instead of advice. This is your invitation to join a quiet revolution. A revolution of people who choose connection over conflict, understanding over being right, love over fear. The world needs more people who know how to build bridges instead of walls, who can speak truth without violence, who can listen with their hearts instead of just their heads. If this journey has touched something in you, if these ideas feel like they could change your life, I'd love to hear about your experience. Leave a comment sharing one insight that really landed for you, or one relationship you're committed to approaching differently. Subscribe if you want more content like this, because there are so many other books and ideas that can continue your transformation. But most importantly, go practice. Go speak from your heart. Go listen with empathy. Go build the connections you've been longing for. The people in your life are waiting for the real you to show up. They're waiting for someone who can see their humanity even when they're not at their best. They're waiting for someone who can speak truth with love instead of violence. That someone is you. The time is now.